Imagine this. A quiet night in Pascagoula, Ohio, April 28, 2002. The streets were calm. Neighbors watching TV, doors locked, unaware that a tragedy was about to unfold that would haunt this small town forever. In a modest home on a quiet street, 38-year-old Rhonda Bogs was finishing dinner with her 2-year-old daughter, Amanda. Rhonda, a mother and wife juggling bills, household chores, and a marriage teetering on the edge, had no idea her life was about to end in the most violent way possible. Rhonda's husband, Dave, was in jail that night, serving a short sentence for failing to pay child support to an ex. His absence, which might have been a relief for some women, left Rhonda to manage everything herself: laundry, dinner, and keeping Amanda entertained. And while she loved her daughter fiercely, Rhonda couldn't help but feel the crushing weight of responsibility and fear. Would she be able to manage life alone? Could she ever trust Dave again? Or even envision a life without him? It was around 6:30 p.m. Rhonda placed a casserole into the oven, turned on cartoons for Amanda, and stepped outside to mow the lawn. But nothing went smoothly. Her old lawnmower coughed and stalled repeatedly. As she wrestled with the stubborn machine, the neighbor waved, offering her a working mower. Rhonda thanked him but refused. The day was ending. The casserole was almost done, and she had no time for distractions. Meanwhile, inside, Amanda played with her stuffed animal, oblivious to the dark clouds hovering over their lives. Every bite she dropped reminded Rhonda of the responsibility she bore: feeding, comforting, protecting her daughter. And though her mind drifted to divorce and finances, to questions about her future, she was focused on one thing: keeping Amanda safe. Then came a subtle, almost imperceptible sound outside, heavy footsteps approaching her house. Rhonda turned, peering through the curtains. A silhouette moved closer to the front door. Unsettled, she tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was a neighbor returning from an errand. Maybe it was nothing. But deep in her gut, a cold fear began to coil. Something felt off. By morning, that fear had become reality. Rhonda's co-worker, Gary Polowski, noticed she hadn't arrived at Hamilton Home Products, where she worked. It was unusual. Rhonda had never been late. Calls to her landline went unanswered. Anxiety grew as he drove toward her home, hoping she was simply delayed. Pulling onto her street, Gary's heart sank. Rhonda's car sat in the driveway. Her house was silent. No signs of life, no answers when he knocked on doors. Then he saw Amanda at the window, her small face red from crying, her eyes wide with fear. Gary's pulse raced as he coaxed the toddler to open the door. Once inside, the horror revealed itself: bloody footprints on the carpet, the unmistakable evidence of a struggle, and Rhonda's body in the kitchen, lifeless, stabbed multiple times. The scene was chaotic. The house had been ransacked, drawers pulled open, personal items scattered. The weapon, one of Rhonda's own kitchen knives, lay beneath her. No forced entry suggested she knew the killer had let them inside. It was robbery, or was it something far darker? Chief Chris Forshee arrived, taking in the scene. Limited resources, a small team, and the first homicide in 6 years all converged on this quiet street. His officers began collecting evidence while Forshee processed the grim reality. Rhonda Bogs, murdered in her home, leaving behind a terrified toddler, a shattered family, and a town in shock. Questions immediately arose. Who would commit such a brutal crime? Could it be Dave, her husband in jail? Could it be someone known to the family, someone trusted? Forshee knew the answers weren't simple. The key to this mystery lay with Amanda, the only witness. Even at her tender age, she had seen what happened. A social worker was brought in to gently interview Amanda. Could a 2-year-old recall what she had witnessed? The room was quiet, tense, as Amanda clutched her stuffed animal. Then, in a chilling moment, she made a motion toward her neck and whispered a name. Uncle Nick. The implications were immediate and devastating. Chief Forshee acted fast, sending officers to locate Nick Robinson. Within hours, he was arrested. Blood evidence in his car added weight to suspicion. But the story was far from over. The young witness's words were just the beginning of a tangled web of misdirection, false confessions, and hidden truths. Nick Robinson sat in the interrogation room, pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He claimed he had no idea what was happening. His story was simple: a long night at bars, drinking until the early morning hours, passing out on his couch. He insisted he hadn't killed Rhonda Bogs, and didn't even know she was dead until he saw it on the news. But the police had Amanda's words. The 2-year-old's finger jabbed the air, her voice trembling as she said, Uncle Nick hurt Mommy. A child's testimony at such a young age could be flawed, yet the motion, the insistence, and the fear in her eyes added a terrifying weight. Forshee and his team pressed Nick, questioning his every alibi, confronting him with the undeniable fact Rhonda had been stabbed to death. Hours passed. Nick denied everything. His calm demeanor wavered under the relentless questioning, his stories clashing with the evidence. Forshee knew one thing: the killer had to be among the people closest to Rhonda, those who had access, knowledge, and opportunity, and every question seemed to circle back to one name. Finally, after 6 crawling hours, Nick agreed to a lie detector test. The results failed. He had lied, but instead of confessing, Nick dug in, claiming innocence. The detectives, pushing harder, dropped the ultimate threat. If he didn't tell the truth, he could face the death penalty. The room went silent. The tension was suffocating. Nick faltered. Slowly, hesitantly, he began to speak. He admitted that he might have been involved, but claimed he couldn't remember. His words were fragmented, clouded by alcohol and fear, yet they signaled a crack in his armor. By 5:00 a.m., he finally broke down, confessing to the murder, but details remained murky. He said it had been an accident, a struggle over a knife. But the detectives weren't convinced. Something about the story didn't add up. While Nick was in custody, Chief Forshee and Detective Bruce Brooks received a call from a man named Bob Sisko, a bandmate of Dave Boggs. Bob had been troubled since hearing about Rhonda's death. He mentioned another former bandmate, Chris Williams, who had been acting strangely the night of the murder. Nervous, pacing, smoking cigarette after cigarette. Chris's behavior suggested more than mere coincidence. Bob's concern was chilling. Chris had a history of theft, having robbed Rhonda and Dave before. Could he have been involved again? The tip reignited doubts. If Nick's confession wasn't entirely truthful, then the investigation had been focusing on the wrong suspect. Forshee decided to investigate further, re-interviewing Amanda and reassessing the timeline. Weeks passed. Amanda, re-interviewed, gave a startling new answer. When asked who had hurt her mother, she didn't say Uncle Nick, she said Bob did it. Forshee felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. A 2-year-old naming a new suspect at random? Or had the toddler's testimony been influenced somehow? The case was growing more complex by the hour. Meanwhile, a private investigator named Matt Sauer entered the scene, hired by Nick Robinson to clear his name. Sauer began piecing together the evidence from scratch. He traced Nick's movements, checking alibis, interviewing witnesses. The breakthrough came from the bars Nick had claimed to be at that night. The first, Merry Melody in Columbus, confirmed Nick's presence until late evening, wearing a distinctive t-shirt, a shirt no one could forget. The second bar, Fairview Inn in Lancaster, also confirmed Nick's presence, corroborating his story. If Nick had committed the murder, he would have had to leave the first bar, drive to Rhonda's house, murder her, and arrive at the second bar all in less time than it physically took to drive between the locations. The timeline was impossible. Nick could not have been the killer. Sauer presented this evidence to Nick's defense attorney. DNA tests followed, and the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, revealed DNA that did not belong to Nick. The case against him collapsed. Freed from suspicion, Nick's life began to rebuild, but the real question remained: who had actually murdered Rhonda Bogs? Sauer's investigation refocused on the stolen items from Rhonda's house. Jewelry, clothes, and a purse had vanished that night. Tracking them became the key to solving the case. Weeks of tireless detective work led Sauer to a clue. A blue Cadillac, sold the day after the murder to a woman in Columbus. Inside the car were Rhonda's belongings, still piled in the back, including her purse, ID, and jewelry. It became clear the killer had acted with reckless abandon, leaving behind a trail of evidence in their haste to escape. By tracing the Cadillac, Sauer zeroed in on the true culprit, Chris Williams, the former bandmate with a history of theft, drug addiction, and a volatile temper. That night, high on crack, Chris had entered Rhonda's home, ransacked it, and when confronted, stabbed her repeatedly before fleeing. The toddler Amanda had witnessed everything, silent in fear, clutching her stuffed animal. The investigation, now complete, led to Chris's arrest. Evidence, eyewitness accounts, and recovered stolen items built an airtight case. On March 28, 2005, Chris Williams was found guilty of Rhonda Bogs' murder and sentenced to 20 years to life, along with additional sentences for robbery and burglary. Nick Robinson, once wrongly accused, was vindicated. His name cleared, he rebuilt his life, stopped drinking, and even won a $3 million settlement from the city of Pascagoula for the miscarriage of justice he had endured. Even after Nick Robinson was exonerated, the shadow of that night still hung over Pascagoula. The town as residents couldn't shake the horror of a mother murdered in her own kitchen, with her toddler as the sole witness. Questions lingered in everyone's minds. How could something like this happen in such a quiet, tight-knit community? And more importantly, how could someone so close, someone who had been trusted, commit such a heinous act? Detective Matt Sauer had unraveled the final pieces of the puzzle. Chris Williams, a man once welcomed into the circle of Rhonda's family, had allowed his addiction and greed to spiral out of control. The stolen items, the blue Cadillac, the frantic drug-fueled night, it all painted a picture of recklessness, desperation, and a complete disregard for human life. Rhonda hadn't been targeted personally. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yet the psychological impact on her daughter, Amanda, was profound. At just 2 years old, Amanda had witnessed her mother's brutal murder. Experts agreed that even with the trauma, her instincts to point out the assailant were remarkably precise. In the months that followed, social workers and child psychologists worked tirelessly with Amanda, helping her process the events in a safe environment, while ensuring that her testimony could aid justice. Every gesture, every word she uttered had been a clue, small, subtle, yet undeniably critical to solving the case. The town of Pascagoula, too, learned a harsh lesson. Crime can happen anywhere, even in the most seemingly serene places. The police department, small and understaffed, recognized the need for better resources, training, and investigative protocols. Chief Chris Forshey, who had overseen the investigation from the beginning, later reflected that without Amanda's courage, without the dedication of Sauer, and without the persistence of detective groups, justice might have remained elusive. Chris Williams's trial became a media sensation. Journalists recounted the horror of Rhonda's death, a shocking twist of a toddler's testimony, and the dramatic exoneration of Nick Robinson. The courtroom was tense, the evidence undeniable. DNA matched the knife to Chris, and the timeline, verified through eyewitness accounts and the recovered Cadillac, confirmed he was the only person capable of committing the crime. When the verdict was read guilty on all counts, relief rippled through Pascagoula, but the grief remained. Rhonda's family, while satisfied with justice, could never undo the pain of her loss. Nick Robinson's vindication was a story of hope amidst tragedy. Wrongly accused, his life had been nearly destroyed. Yet with determination, legal support, and the meticulous work of private investigator Matt Sauer, he regained his freedom, his reputation, and eventually a sense of normalcy. He stopped drinking, returned to work, and became an advocate for reform in wrongful conviction cases, ensuring that others might not endure the same ordeal he had faced. Meanwhile, Amanda, now under the loving care of her family, began to heal. Though memories of that night would linger, she grew surrounded by safety and love. Her early testimony, so critical to unraveling the truth, became an example for law enforcement and child advocacy groups worldwide, proving that even the youngest voices can hold immense power. In the end, the murder of Rhonda Bogs was not just a story of tragedy, but of resilience. It highlighted the importance of thorough investigations, the power of observation, and the courage required to confront evil. From the chaos of a night filled with violence, confusion, and fear emerged clarity, justice, and ultimately, accountability. Pascagoula itself changed. The once quiet city took steps to strengthen community policing, improve emergency response, and support families affected by crime. The story of Rhonda Bogs, Amanda, Nick Robinson, and Chris Williams became a somber reminder. Evil can strike unexpectedly, but perseverance, courage, and attention to detail can uncover the truth. For viewers of this story, it's more than just true crime. It's a testament to the human spirit, the necessity of justice, and the extraordinary impact of even the smallest voices. A toddler's instincts, a determined investigator, and a community unwilling to let tragedy go unresolved ensured that Rhonda's story did not end in silence. As the city of Pascagoula slowly healed, life continued. But for those who knew the story, the neighbors, the friends, the officers, and especially Amanda, April 28th, 2002, would never be forgotten. A mother's life lost, a toddler's courage tested, and a killer finally brought to justice. It was a case that shook a community, captivated a nation, and proved that truth, no matter how hidden, will eventually rise to the surface. And so, the story concludes not just as a tale of horror, but as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, persistence, courage, and attention to detail can illuminate the truth. Rhonda's memory lives on, not only in those who loved her, but in the lessons her case taught the world.